Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Dynasty Tradecast, brought to you this week by RotoViz. We're RotoViz. What's up, guys? As always, I'm your host, Eric Bertzloff, better known on Twitter as @DynastyTrades, joined by my co-host, Nathan Powell. Nathan, what's up, dude?
Hello, Eric. I think we've missed like 3 of our last 5 shows, but we're going to overcome. We're going to get back to our every week pace starting now. We're going to start a Brett Favre-like streak starting now.
This is the time of season where admittedly a lot of Dynasty folks check out for like a month or two. Like we go all year round, but this is the time of the year where I don't know, it seems to be the quietest in the Dynasty community, getting ready for the 2019 season. But that's enough of being quiet. Somebody who's not quiet is our host our host. You want to be the host, Trey? All right, our guest, our guest, Trey Barrett. You can follow him on Twitter @Trey Barrett. That's 2 R's, 2 T's, and you can check him out. He's also a host of the Fantasy Joe's podcast. So a fellow podcaster like ourselves. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's definitely heading into the off season, man. I had a guy respond to me today on GroupMe about a trade inquiry that I sent like 2.5 weeks ago. For a split second, I was like, "What? Which trade are you responding?" Oh, okay, yeah, it's been a little while.
The one that's been canceled for over a week at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I already moved AJ Green, but thanks for getting back to me.
Yeah, we got to take a break at some point. Like, go. Even teachers need a summer vacation, you know.
There is no off season, Eric. It says it on your DLF shirt. So
that's you're goddamn right. It does. Okay, well let's go ahead and talk about the kind of the rundown for the show. We're going to be focusing on what Nathan is endearingly calling the coaching carousel. A lot of impending moves coming and moves that have already happened. And so we're going to talk about Dynasty impact players that you want to buy and sell with a new coaching staff coming into the organization. So before we get into that part of the show, a quick reminder that you can support the RotoViz radio network and our 10 shows per week on Patreon. Patreon ships start at just $5 per month. They provide you exclusive access to our awesome show RotoViz Live during the season. And if you buy now, you will get through the season. So become a RotoViz radio patron today. Join an exclusive community of listeners, access premium content, and do your part in helping the network to grow and produce high-quality, industry-leading programming.
Speaking of exclusives, as a loyal podcast listener, you get 30% off RotoViz NFL Pass for the 2019 season. It's available through the NFL Podcast homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast. 2019 season is around the corner. It's only like 9 months away. Yep, make sure you're ready. Gain unlimited access to our NFL content and tools, so you get amazing value and support the podcast network. Once again, that's rotoviz.com/podcast.
Yeah, I mean, we're not even done with this season technically, but I mean, for fantasy purposes, we done. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and talk coaching carousel. Nathan, your beloved Tampa Bay Buccaneers brought in the man in the hat. That's Bruce Arians to take over that team. So I guess I'll kick to you, Nathan, and kind of get your initial thoughts on this and what kind of your feelings are.
Yeah, I feel like there's been some controversial hires in this offseason, and Bruce Arians was not one of them. He was kind of the safe hire, the one that most people thought it was a good hire for the Bucs to bring in Bruce Arians, and then the offensive and defensive coordinators that he brought in as well, Byron Leftwich, and then the Jets head coach, I'm blanking on his name, as the defensive coordinator. But strictly from a fantasy perspective, when there is a positive coaching hire, when there is some excitement around a coaching hire, I'm looking to sell more so than I am looking to buy. And my sell in the Buccaneers offense right now is Chris Godwin. People are going to be getting more and more excited about Godwin as, the possibility of Deshaun Jackson not coming back enters into the fold, and the concept, Bruce Arians going to mold the young wide receiver and Chris Godwin into an NFL wide receiver too, a fantasy wide receiver too. And I think that there's just still, even if Deshaun Jackson does depart, there's so much going on in that offense with, they're going to get the running backs involved. They're going to get O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate and Mike Evans involved. That Godwin has to become a very legit NFL wide receiver 2 to become, fantasy relevant. Yes, he might be a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 for next year, but if you can get wide receiver 2 trade value, I think now is the time to do so.
Yeah, I like that. I've never been a Godwin guy myself, but I guess that seems like the right play. Trey, where are you taking this?
It's funny because that's exactly, I wrote in my notes, buy Jameis, buy Evans, because I think those are two guys whose value is climbing. But unless the player, the dynasty owner that you're dealing with that owns those guys is just hiding under a rock or, has checked out for the last month, they realize the value on those guys are climbing. And so I sell Chris Godwin. So you hit the nail on the head. For me, he's currently going 50 in January ADP from DLF. He's wide receiver 27, ahead of Allen Robinson, Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams. He's like the 55th pick overall. So this is a guy going in the middle of the 5th round. And this was before really that news even had set hold. So, he's a strong sell for me at that value. And I anticipate when that ADP comes out next month that it'll be even higher. So I'm all aboard selling Godwin right now.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to find another sell on this team just because it's like, okay, I guess we could sell Cameron Brate, but like, okay, that's a little silly since he's not really worth anything. And then there's no running backs on the team. Ronald Jones' value is cratered out. So it really is, and you're not going to sell Mike Evans or Jameis Winston. Although Winston, maybe there's an argument for it, in the offseason if somebody's starting to get a little crazy. I've actually got Winston in a couple places and I've got a lot of offers for him. But I think I chatted with Nathan on those. But no, I think that you guys hit the nail on the head there. I think the buy is just the same buys that were there previously. I think Winston probably is a buy, but I could hear an argument for him being a sell. So I think Godwin is the proverbial sell here. Just in general, do we think this team looks a whole lot different with Arians?
I think it's going to be a better team overall. That's just my bias creeping in, and the fact that I think Bruce Arians is a better coach than Dirk Cutter, and then the supporting staff as well. So I do think that it gets kind of under. People talk about garbage time and how that's good for fantasy. Being a good NFL team can also be good for fantasy because, you're still putting up points, you're putting up touchdowns. And so I think that you don't necessarily have to have a bad defense in order to produce fantasy points.
No, there's definitely truth to that, but it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to dump it. But you have to sweat out every single one of your matchups because it's the fourth quarter, and then finally people start just dumping TDs onto the board. So, all right, Nathan, do you want to pivot to our next one?
Our next one is definitely one of the more unique hires we've seen in recent memory. It's Cliff Kingsbury, who was fired from Texas Tech, a Big 12 school, and has now hired as the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, they have Josh Rosen in the fold and David Johnson. What are your thoughts on the Kingsbury hire, Trey? Is there anyone that sticks out as a buy or sell here?
I think to me, I'm going to reserve judgment, right? I obviously there's been a lot of criticism, and it looks like it was a fairly desperate hire. I know they were looking to move on from Wilkes and getting an offensive, the quote unquote next Sean McVay that everybody's chasing.
Yeah,
seems really appealing. But, man, it's a little scary. I don't know. I know, Rosen's being pretty undervalued, but he also looked pretty lost at times this year. David Johnson's aging. I would probably kick the tires on Christian Kirk. He's 22 years old. He was a top 50 pick. He's currently going as wide receiver 30 in Dynasty ADP. So if there's anyone that's turned off from this past season and is willing to move Christian Kirk, he's a guy I'd be willing to invest in. I think he's got some great potential there and can really turn into a wide receiver one on that team.
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit more likely, especially in Superflex, that someone might sour on Rosen more quickly than they sour on Christian Kirk, because he showed flashes, and certainly he wasn't like fantasy relevant week to week. But that type of production in the rookie year rarely scares people off. Brian Malone always talks about buy rookie picks, sell sophomores, because the value just inexplicably rises almost every time.
Yeah, you mentioned David Johnson being kind of old. I think he might be the buy here. I think that having an offensive-minded coach could catapult him back up to a top 5 dynasty pick right now in the 20th pick in the solidified pretty much in the late second round of startups right now. So he'd probably be the guy that I would target. And I think, I don't know that this experiment works, but I do think that it's going to be, I don't know, like it's probably not a fair comparison, but like a Chip Kelly type, like offensive, like attack is what I think we're going to see here. Whether it works or not, I have no idea, but I think that they just need a spark, and that's really what they're going for. And you mentioned like the young hire, the guy under 40, the next Sean McVay. That seems to be what they're going for, and I think they just wanted to spark something different. And I can relate as a Bengals fan. I'm like, please don't hire a guy I've heard of. Just go with anyone I've never heard of. So please not John Fox is pretty much what I was banking or Hugh Jackson. Like, no, nobody on earth. Yeah, like nobody that's a safe pick. Can we just go bananas? And I think that's where the Cardinals are right now. It's like, you know, they don't need to make a safe pick here. I think they can gamble a little bit this year and in the upcoming years to see if this pans out. But it is an odd one because he got fired from his last job at Texas A&M. Is that right?
Texas Tech, yes.
I'm sorry, Texas Tech. He got fired. It's like, all right, you get fired from your last job in college, and now you're an NFL head coach. Right. That makes sense.
All right. Speaking of people who got fired, Adam Gase was fired from the Miami Dolphins, and now he is the head coach of the New York Jets. I'll start off by saying it's not particularly a sell, but this makes me sad for my abundance of Sam Darnold shares. I know that once upon a time, Adam Gase was a young QB guru, but you're not a young QB guru just because you were Peyton Manning's offensive coordinator. Eric could be Peyton Manning's offensive coordinator. Dan could be Peyton Manning's offensive coordinator.
I'm the QB whisperer. I don't know if you know this.
Yeah. So Adam Gase, I mean, he hasn't like proven anything to be worth, you know, a second head coaching job, but he got it anyways. So I'm a little bit worried about my Darnold shares, but honestly, this is the type of scenario where if there are also people who weren't Darnold fans that just happen to end up getting Darnold shares, and they're like, oh, well, now that Gase is here, I really don't like Darnold. Maybe try and, you know, buy low on those. But I think for the most part, the people who have Darnold right now aren't selling just because of Adam Gase.
Yeah, and then I think and I think you can relate to this, Nathan. As a Darnold owner, that you paid enough, especially if you're in a super flex league, to really let this thing pan out. There's not a good sell window here. Gase is not driving up his value, so you might as well see how this thing goes. Trenton?
Yeah. I put in my notes here, man. I'm not sure I'm buying anyone. I just don't, you know, this offense, there's a lot of question marks. And I think, you know, if I own anyone on the offense, if I own Robbie Anderson or Elijah McGuire, if I own Sam Darnold, I'm just holding them and hoping for something promising. But I don't see me inquiring to do any buying of these guys. Yeah,
the Jets team, this is like the like foghorn sound whenever you hear, like, think about the Jets. It's like, no, thank you, I'll pass. I'm completely on board with that. There's not a player that interests me in buying unless like Robbie Anderson becomes cheap, but he's not going to. So there's players that everybody's valuation is not at a low enough point to where it's going, and there's going to be a big shuffle too on this team of offensive weapons. So I completely agree with you. I don't think that's in the cards, but maybe if somebody becomes free, if this team really sucks or something like that, maybe like Robbie Anderson becomes a buy mid-season, something like that.
Yeah, and I guess the one like perspective buy could end up being Jets wide receiver 1 to be named later. I don't think they entered the 2019 season with Robbie Anderson as their wide receiver 1. They're going to get an early round wide receiver or pick up one in free agency. There's a couple one out there. So I think that whoever ends up going there, it's an attractive spot if you like Darnold, and I do. So I do like whoever ends up being the wide receiver 1 there. All right, let's move on to Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur of the Green Bay Packers. He was the Titans offensive coordinator. Another one where, I mean, there was a number of head scratchers in this head coaching hiring process, and people saw Titans offensive coordinator, not exactly the most explosive offense you've ever seen, gets hired as the Packers head coach. So what are your thoughts on LaFleur, if you have any, Trey, and just the offense in general?
So I think for me that I think anything is better than McCarthy up there in Green Bay. I think that there's a real potential to unlock Aaron Rodgers back to being a dominant. I mean, he's been a good quarterback as far as fantasy production. He's been a quarterback 1, but he's not the quarterback 1 that we've been used to seeing for several years. And so I think that it's promising for everyone on that offense. There is one sell for me, and that's Aaron Jones. I'm currently reading a book that just got released called Analytics of Dynasty by Jordan McNamara. And he talks in that book about taking the profile over the player. Aaron Jones was a 5th-round NFL draft pick, and you know the likelihood of those guys putting up top 24 production is like 21%. And he's currently the running back 17 in recent ADP, and I anticipate that's going to climb. Not that I don't like Aaron Jones, not that I don't think he can be productive, but with the regime change, I just don't know that the long-term value's there. He's creeping up into the territory where I think that you can sell him for some other guys, like maybe add a little something to get a carry on Johnson or just upgrade to someone I think that's got a little better staying power at the running back position.
Interesting. I don't think I'm on board with selling Jones. I think he's looked good enough that I agree that like him. I don't know if you took that prospect and like just threw it at a wall, I'd say sure it's unlikely it would pan out. But I mean, at this point, he's shown such flashes. He's looked so good. I don't know. I think I would be more. I guess I would be more inclined to sell probably the wide receiver twos on this team, the MVSs, the St. Browns. See if you can get something for one of those guys. If there is any hype here with LaFleur, I really don't think there is. I don't think it's moving the needle. Like you said, anything's better than Mike McCarthy, and he's not the Bengals' new coach, which is fabulous. So that's great news there. But this is another, like, I feel like there was the Belichick coaching tree, and now we're like into the Sean McVay coaching tree where everybody's just trying to get a piece. Where the Bengals are about to hire from that tree. The Packers.
You're skipping ahead, Eric. What are you doing?
I'm sorry. Are people unaware of who the Bengals are going to hire? Is that like a secret that hasn't been on Roto World all week? So we're gonna, spoiler alert, at the end of the show we're gonna talk about the Bengals' new hire. But this is But yeah, this is an interesting one. Again, it seems like people are taking some shots with new coaches and are maybe just tired of that old guard sitting around, which is cool by me. I want to see something innovative. I want to see some no-look passes is I guess what I'm saying.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, for me with the Packers, I've always thought that Aaron Jones was a little bit overvalued, and he's getting more valuable, but he's also proving something along with that. Yeah. So I'm hesitant to sell Jones because I think he's shown enough talent to clearly be above Jamal or Jonathan Williams. I always forget the J. Williams as Jamal Williams. But I also think that the Packers are just bad enough that they can't afford to invest at the running back position once again. So they're going to be going elsewhere, and then Aaron Jones ends up being the RB1. And as everyone knows, the Aaron Rodgers RB1 is going to be a good fantasy asset. All right, let's move on to the official team of the Dice Tradecast. They must be mentioned at least once every episode, probably 3 times every episode. And that's the Cleveland Browns. They hired offensive coordinator Freddie Kitchens to be their head coach. They hired the Bucs offensive coordinator Todd Monken to be their offensive coordinator. And Monken was a favorite of Evan Silva, who basically was trying to campaign to get Todd Monken a head coaching job, but he ends up being in the offensive coordinator position of the Cleveland Browns, which sets him up for, if that offense continues to do well, for Monken to get a head coaching job in the next couple of years. But anyways, let's just talk about the Browns for a second. We've always been big buyers of all of the Browns, and I don't think that this Kitchens and Monken combination changes that. I think, if anything, it increases it. But, of course, since everyone's so excited about it, are you maybe like, oh, well, the head coaches don't matter that much? Or is the excitement for the coaches giving you pause for the players, Trey?
Not really. I mean, I've been really excited the last 24 months. I've talked on our podcast about how I was cheering for the Browns because they were kind of like the butt of every NFL joke. And they fired Stashi, and, they had this wealth of draft picks, which they seem to have really begun a turnaround, and I for one am just excited to see them moving in the right direction. This offense is exciting. I do think that the value of these guys is skyrocketing, although one guy, Jarvis Landry, is a guy for me that it seems to be, people are just some trade polls that I've seen on Twitter have me wondering if it's not going to be an off season to maybe look into buying Jarvis Landry, because he seems to be really devalued right now. It seems like everybody's, and I know he didn't have a great season this year, but there was a lot of transition that took place this year. And I mean, look at what Monken did. Look at what Kitchens did the last 8 games where he was calling plays there for the Browns. And then look at what Todd Monken did this year with Winston and Fitzpatrick in Tampa. So I think Landry is a guy that I'd probably kick the tires on a little bit.
Yep, you sniped me. I am in exactly the same spot. I think Landry is dangerously low in value right now. So he's proven to be, and even in this off year, he was still very productive. So he was frustrating to put into your lineup, and you couldn't trust him this year. But such is the nature of a down year. So I'm completely on board with Landry there.
Yeah, I just worry about Landry ever returning to that target volume, and if he doesn't, then he's never going to be a low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 again, and he'll kind of settle in that mid to low end wide receiver 2 at best. But I do think that at his price right now, he's definitely a good buy. I guess we'll round table this. What would be the highest rookie pick you'd give up for him? Mine would probably be around like 104. Oh, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's the right valuation. I don't think going much higher than that is. And I don't think it's going to be necessary. I think the 104 gets it done with a lot of Landry owners coming off this year. So I think that that's right around the valuation that he should be at, Nathan.
Yeah, I agree. I'd be a little hesitant, honestly, right now to pay the 104 for him, because I think when the rookie draft comes around, I think you could potentially get him for less. And there's these running backs, these running backs right now that wouldn't be really worth the top 4 rookie pick, but if they land in Kansas City or one of these dream spots, might kind of vault up there. So, but yeah, I probably wouldn't pay anything higher than that.
All right, let's move on to the Miami Dolphins. They are expected to hire Brian Flores, I believe the linebacker coach for the New England Patriots once their season's over. Obviously, that not much impact from a fantasy perspective, but is there anyone in this Dolphins offense we're excited about? It's kind of a barren wasteland. Maybe a Kenyon Drake is he's a proverbial perennial whatever buy for me, but
Those are 2 very different words, by the way.
Proverbial perennial. I don't know. I can't talk right now. Any excitement about the Dolphins?
I mean, I'm really excited about Devontae. Oh no, I couldn't even finish that statement. No, there's really not. There's not. This team is almost like the Jets. It's like kind of a dynasty wasteland at the moment. I'm like scouring here to think of anybody, but no, I want no part of this offense whatsoever. So I'll hard pass all around. And this hire doesn't move the needle for me, but maybe he'll be able to turn the tide of this team. But yeah, this team is bad right now for dynasty purposes.
I know it's crazy, Nathan, and I knew you were going to mention Kenyon Drake, but I really, sincerely, I don't think it's a terrible idea to inquire, because he is an electric. I mean, the guy almost had 1,000 yards this year. He scored 9 touchdowns. Actually, he might have broken 1,000 yards. If he were given the opportunity, I think he could. I mean, he's not. I don't think he's going to be this RB1. I don't think you can buy him with the hope of that. But if there's someone that's really just completely soured on the situation, I think that he's a reasonable guy. He's only 24 years old. I don't think it's completely unreasonable given his size and speed and draft capital for him to end up becoming a serviceable wide receiver 2 and returning a little bit of value if you can get him for, say like a late second.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think a late second would do it, but I don't know anybody who's selling Drake for that price tag right now. Is he?
Yeah, no, I think his price hovers around a late first, early second.
Yeah, and that's too much for me. It's just such a situational player that you very rarely feel comfortable sticking in your lineup. Those are the type of players I just stay away from altogether.
Yeah, and Kalen Ballage, he's the type of player that, and entering his sophomore year, he typically doesn't have a rising value. He has a decrease because he had like a couple flashes, but there's not really a clear role for him right now. And he was a lower draft pick. And so, I mean, I'd throw a third at him right now just because people might be giving up on him because, like, oh, that was the last coaching staff that picked him. There's no connection with him with the old staff to the new staff. But I mean, I think that at the very least, he's a nice handcuff to have for Kenyon Drake, because once again, the Dolphins are another team that can't afford to invest at running back because they have so many other needs elsewhere.
Well, let me ask a question about a player who had a decent bit of draft capital and just historically highly drafted tight ends tend to gain value in the offseason. What about Mike Gesicki? What are we doing with him? Is there any – it seems like now there's almost no hype around him. Maybe now is the time to buy Gesicki and wait him out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it's definitely the time to buy Mike Gesicki. I mean, we're only a year removed, actually not even quite a year removed, for him destroying the combine. And I think that knowing that it takes a little while for tight ends to produce and people being pretty enamored with this upcoming tight end class, I don't know what you could get him for, but I think that his price is quite depressed from where it was this time last year. And he's still a guy that I think can produce. So I think that's a great prospect to check into.
Yeah, I would imagine it would probably cost like 2/3. I mean, I wouldn't imagine most people asking for a second for Gesicki right now. And I think that some people are excited about the other tight ends from that class with Mark Andrews and a couple of the other guys, that Gesicki is the guy to buy among last year's tight ends. All right, let's move on.
By the way, 2/3 that seems like an absolute like slam dunk just to gamble with. That seems all day.
Yeah, I mean, I could be wrong on that. It might require a second, but I also don't really see like anyone giving up a second for him either. So,
yeah.
All right, let's move on to the Bengals. Spoiler alert: we were informed earlier in the program that Eric's Bengals plan to hire Zach Taylor, Rams quarterback coach, once his season is over. So, Zach Taylor, what are your thoughts on his impact on the Bengals assets, Eric?
Yeah, my favorite part is I've never heard of him, so I had to go look him up when he came out. I was so excited. I'm not kidding. I was telling everyone, I was like, please let me have never heard of this guy. Let him not be the Mike McCarthy, the John Fox, the old school guy. And sure enough, it ain't. So I'm excited. I think this entire team needs a reboot. Clearly, Lewis lost the team in the last 2 years. Them hiring him again last year was a big mistake. So they didn't double down on the mistake. They got rid of him, and they're moving on. I do think it has some interesting implications for Dalton. Either Taylor's going to want to like use him as the quarterback of the future, or they go out and get somebody else. And a middling quarterback like Dalton, a little bit below average in the league, is one of those players that you don't ever really want to give away, but a new coach might, have the wherewithal to say, you know what, screw it, let's just gamble and see if we can, float the boat with Tyrod Taylor or Joe Flacco or Nick Foles while we, let Dalton go.
Could the Bengals be in a tank for Tua situation?
They certainly could be. They certainly should be, honestly, because all of their contracts are starting to get old. I mean, you got Joe Mixon on that team, but AJ Green is getting older. It's a team that really is not in its prime anymore. And there's a period where they were making the playoffs with like Jeremy Hill, with Gio, those guys all on rookie contracts, where they really were in a situation where they could strike, and they just never did. So I think that they're going to be turning into a reboot. They are going to be the worst team in the AFC North, unfortunately, and they already are. But that's it's exciting for the future, just getting some fresh blood in there, whether it works or not.
Yeah, and if I give a buy, it's going to be the very, very deep dive, which was once not a deep dive at all, and it's going to be John Ross. He has shown very little to nothing due to injuries and just not playing well when he's on the field. But I think that there is some renewed hope with outside of a Marvin Lewis offense that maybe Zach Taylor can get a little bit creative with John Ross and his speed, and just resorting back to the fact that he was a top 10 NFL draft pick. So
he just reminds me of Tavon Austin too. It's just like they just can't seem to figure out what to do with him. But he does get a touchdown every single game. But it's like they drafted him in the top 10 and seemingly have no clue what to do with him. So maybe you're right.
Yeah, so I mean, if I can throw a couple seconds at the John Ross owner, I'm fine doing that right now, as long as it's not early seconds. But it kind of just depends on each John Ross owner has a different degree of souredness, if that makes any sense. Trey, what are your thoughts on the Bengals offense?
I like the call on the Dalton hire, and man, I was the same way. I when I saw this list, I was like, who's Zach Taylor? Like, I'm scrambling to try and see. It's like, I got to read up on this guy. I know nothing about him. And one thing I discovered, I was floored by this. So he was actually in Miami early on in the Tannehill years as like an associate or assistant head or quarterback coach. And, while he was there under his tutelage, Tannehill in his first 4 seasons in the NFL, only 2 quarterbacks have thrown for more yards. Peyton Manning and Dan Marino. So if this guy could do that with Ryan Tannehill, then Andy Dalton, I mean, who's currently like quarterback 28 in current ADP, and that's one quarterback ADP, but that's positional ranking.
Right.
I mean, we've seen Andy Dalton put up, quarterback 5 seasons in the past, and I know that's been a few years, but I mean, quarterback 28 price with AJ Green and Tyler Boyd and Joe Mixon in the backfield and catching passes. I mean, I think that I don't know what do you guys think it would take right now if you needed a stopgap, if you needed a third quarterback or, needed a second quarterback even until one of your, a Lamar Jackson or someone was ready to completely rely on, or a Sam Darnold. What would you give for Andy Dalton in a super flex league.
Oh, super flex. I think that he's late first. When you were going to say one quarterback, I was going to say he's in the category of worth less than a second, more than a third. But yeah, with super flex, I think he's firmly worth a late first.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say early second, but kind of the same thing. He's right there, so that's probably the valuation to buy. And he's always been kind of a nicer. I've always liked him in super flex leagues as like a QB 2-3, just because he doesn't have that many stinker games, so he really is good for 12 to 15 points. But you're right. I mean, he hasn't looked spectacular in years. I'm just not sure that that's really Andy Dalton. But maybe you're right. Maybe that's the direction to take this too. Is that Taylor's going to come in and just love on him some Andy Dalton and really just fine tune him up and make him bend to what he once was. But I think that's as likely as to happen as he walks in and day one says, "You're not my guy. I want somebody else."
Yeah. I just, I'm thinking maybe, you've got Cam and maybe later on in this offseason, he ends up having surgery and it looks like he's going to be out. I mean, I definitely only super flex. One quarterback leagues, he's not on my radar, but super flex leagues, I think, those are the kind of guys that, as a third, as a backup option or, injury insurance, the price could be right.
Yeah. No, and that's why Superflex is so intriguing. I like it a lot for that exact reason. It makes me think about Andy Dalton and where Joe Flacco is going and Nick Foles.
That's just sounds terrible. Which is why I always advocate to spend early round capital, spend assets on quarterbacks in Superflex, because I don't want to have to deal with the Andy Daltons, Nick Foles, and Joe Flacco's. I'll happily spend up for some of the better quarterbacks. Unfortunately, I didn't spend up for Patrick Mahomes in any of those leagues, though.
Yeah. I mean, the general Superflex strategy, I completely agree with there, and I do have Patrick Mahomes in a number of leagues. So suck it, Nathan. But no, I mean that strategy is. What I'll say is doing years of Superflex leagues it is way easier to build around two very good quarterbacks because they're not going anywhere. Your Phillip Rivers is going to be there for another couple years. That like you can build around that type of guy. So yeah, it's, getting two guys that are in that top tier is key. And then you might not win this year, but at least you're going to be good for the years to come.
All righty. It's been a fun show. Trey, once again, just let everyone know wherever they can find you. We appreciate having us on, and we appreciate you coming on. And thanks for talking coaching carousel. Yeah,
man, I'm happy to be able to host the podcast tonight. So thanks for the opportunity. You guys can find me at Trey Barrett on Twitter, and you can find the Fantasy Joes at FF Joes on Twitter. And thanks again, guys. It was kind of fun talking. It was a little fun digging into these guys. I didn't know as much about some of these guys, so I had to do a little research, a little homework, and so it was fun. Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Make sure you guys do go check out the Fantasy Joes. And I think this was a pretty quick episode here, Nathan. What did we clock this one in at? About 35 minutes?
And after editing, it might be like 34 minutes. Rock and roll.
God, unbelievable! You sure you don't want to talk about some nonsense? How's Nate Walks the Dog going?
Eric, part of my inspiration for Nate Dog Walks the Dog is like you would always like send me like a clapping emoji or like a bravo. No one has been doing that lately, so my inspiration, my want to do Nate Dog Walks the Dog is dwindling. Fortunately for you, the football season's also dwindling, so there you go.
Are you saying that Nate Dog Walks the Dog might not be renewed for another season? Is that what I'm hearing here?
We might need a sponsor. Shout out to anyone who wants to pay me to do Nate Dog Walks the Dog on Snapchat. 12 people.
Snapchat dying app. It's you need it as a better platform for sure. You need to do a Twitter live video. That's where I think we got to take this thing.
All right, we'll just have someone pay me to do that. We'll do it.
All right, cool. RotoViz, I'm going to need you to go ahead and pay Nathan to do that. That would be great. All right. Well, on that note, I think we are all wrapped up here, and we'll catch up with you guys next week. Have a great rest of your week.